replacement wastewater treatment plant. Whereas another mobile home park faced with the same scenario might conclude that it's a better business decision for them to connect to a public sewer system. But so I think this is the future where the bar is going to be raised on everybody, and there's going to have to be a lot of business decisions made about what to do about it, either to continue to remain separate and do your own thing, or connect into a public sewer system.
And I had gotten some feedback that previous rate study, which I've read, that there's people in the NAR area that are concerned with the plan that was previously put forth, that the port deposit plant would have a line that's going out to take mobile home parks off of their systems. I think we need to make sure that we're not, creating sprawl or creating growth in an area if it wasn't intended, so that we can earn, in the name of nutrient credits, to take them offline. So thanks for that discussion.
Okay. Is there any other questions from any of the other council members regarding this resolution? It will be introduced tonight and be considered on June 4th. The next amendment, the next resolution is 46-2013 regarding the land purchase agreement and home partnership on the property, I believe on North Street in Elkhorn. Mr. Wine, do you have some background on this? There are some council members that were not in office at the time that the original contract was signed.
Sure. Yeah, just for a little background, the previous Board of Commissioners approved a letter of intent and purchase agreement back in July of 2012. We've been working with Mr. Hodgett since that time in the development of the former senior center on at the address of 214 North Street. Mr. Hodgett is here today, obviously, and I think it would be appropriate and informational if he were to give a update on what he's done since probably going back 2 years ago, I guess, Frank. If you could give an update, that would be good.
Yeah, I'll be glad to. Thank you, Mr. President and members of the council. It's great to see you this morning. We're at the point where this project has proceeded greatly since, what was that, July 2012 that we were here when we got the county commissioners to approve the land purchase agreement for the property, 214 North Street, which is in the town of Elkhorn. It's the former county jail facility, Buffalo Senior Center. We have looked at this property and evaluated it for the potential of developing it as a senior housing site. Using the information and different financing sources that are available to us from the state. At this point, we are in conversation, as the property is located within the town's historic district. We've had conversations with the Maryland Historic Trust, as well as presented to the town, the Planning Commission, as well as to the Historic Architectural Review Commission of the town. We will have subsequent meetings with them to get the approval for the project as it currently stands. In order for us to come before you today, there had to be a request for additional land in order to accommodate the parking from what was initially contemplated in that July 12th purchase agreement. So we come before you today with a request to try to acquire an additional piece of property over on that on the property itself at North Street, in order to be able to go forward with the project as it's currently contemplated, which is for 53 units of affordable senior housing. Again, senior housing, so it's age restricted. And the current definition of age restriction to the state is age 62 or greater. So it really does serve a very meaningful population within the county. And at this point, we are proceeding with all of our construction drawings. I think what you have before you is the add-on subdivision plat, which was prepared by our surveyor and our civil engineer. Our architects have also proceeded to the point where we will be submitting our viability and commitment application to the state for the funding that we need to apply for, and in order to close this project by the end of this calendar year. Our hope is to close by the end of December this year. In fact, the schedule that we've shared with the county at this point puts us at a bond closing around December the 5th. So we propose to leave the existing Buckworth Center or the former county jail completely intact and to rehab it. We initially had contemplated using historic tax credits, but we may not be able to do that. We still will comply with the requirements of the Section 106 review in order to make sure that we are actually making full use of the historic components of that property as we can. At this point, there's been changes to the interior of the structure because it was used for a senior center for a number of years, but there's still a number of historic components which we would like to keep. We propose to add on the back with an additional building which would house 48 of the 53 units. So there'll be an additional structure off the back of about 48,000 square feet. The existing structure itself is around 8,800 square feet. So our hope is to come before you today in order to amend the purchase agreement for us to allow us to acquire the additional piece of property. It's about 1/4 of an acre, I believe, is the add-on parcel. And in exchange for that, we also are requesting that the purchase agreement be amended to reflect that. That will also allow us to apply for partnership rental housing program funds at the state, which are very important to the project. And with that amendment, I don't know if you want to go into that part of it. Yeah. All right, so the other part of the equation that we're trying to bring before you, and I know it gets a little convoluted, but in a simple manner, the way that this works is that the partnership rental housing program funds, which are important to the project, are non-amortizing, which means that they don't have a mortgage payment on it. They amount to about $3.4 million on the project. In order for those to come to the project, the local jurisdiction in some form or fashion has to make a contribution to the project. The way that we fashion that, and it can take in different ways, it can be a cash contribution, it can be contribution in the way of development fees, it could be waiver of fees, and this can come from not only the county, but could come obviously from the town in this instance. The town is providing some sewer contribution charges. Not the hookup, but they are providing some credits under the sewer fee. But the other form that was structured in this deal is that because the property had value, excess value in it, the one that we applied, the one that we employed, the one that we commissioned rather than the appraisal. The idea was that because there was excess value in that appraisal, that we could say that that would be, by virtue, if you will, the contribution of the local jurisdiction. That would allow us to participate in the partnership rental housing program funds. So to give you some sense of the number, this was just the way that the deal got structured, because this would enable the county to have us tap into these funds without having any extra money come out of the county's pocket, without having any extra fees be waived by the county, and allow us to tap into those funds. And it became a very expedient way for us to accomplish that. It also allows the purchase price for the original property to remain the same, so that there was no diminution, there was not a decrease in what was being offered to the county. In fact, we're talking at this point about increasing the offer to the county. Forgive me if that blacked out a little bit. So the purpose in coming before you today is to provide you with an update. We are proceeding very, very, very strongly on this right now. We have to get our viability commitment application to the state. And this month, we have our architectural drawings about 80% complete. We're working very closely with the town to make sure that we comply with their requirements. We're coming before you today with the hope to amend the purchase agreement to allow us to participate in the partnership rental housing program funds and restructure the deal so that it works for both the county as well as ourselves.
Can I ask, are you
Please.
asking for this building, this a 1/4 acre then, for no change in the purchase price?
We are requesting that we, in exchange for that piece of property, there is an exchange that's been worked out with Trimble, and that is basically we would be improving the 137 East High Street, which is right across the street from where the Department of Social Services will then perform their intake. It's right across the way. It's not a street, but it's a parking area directly across 137 East High Street. the former, it's where the voting booths used to be.
So, yeah, right, so maintenance, storage building.
Is that our building?
Yes.
So we're giving you our old building, social services has been using it.
No, we're actually paying for it.
You are paying for it,
Yes.
but you said no change to the purchase price.
Maybe Jason.
What's the value of the tenant fit out in the warehouse?
Council President Hodge, we have been provided by Home Partnerships an estimate sheet from Southway Builders that estimates the renovations to the 137 East High Street building being $50,273. So there's a little over $50,000. There's a little over $50,000 in the value of the fit out, the renovations to 137. And in addition to that, one of the key components of the amended, the first amended land purchase agreement is that Home Partnerships has agreed to an increase in the purchase price that's tied to an appraisal that's just been completed. The numbers aren't back yet, but an appraisal completed by the Maryland Community Development Administration, the state of Maryland, whereby the purchase price would be no more than $450,000 and no less than $415,000. If based on the appraisals, or the appraisal, the value of the property, according to the formula set forth in paragraph 3 of the first amended agreement, were less than $415,000, the county would have the unilateral right to terminate the agreement and walk away. So the county's looking at an increase in the purchase price, plus the value of the renovations to 137. And those are really the two material changes on the county side of the ledger. Another material change is the tax credit allocation contingency has changed, now looking at low-income housing tax credits from the Maryland Community Development Administration. So paragraph 7 of the original agreement's been modified to reflect the new tax credit program that Home Partnerships is operating under. Those are really the key components. There is a plat that's been provided to show the additional land. And is that highlighted in yellow?
This is red.
Okay, it's highlighted in red on your plat.
What was the original consideration?
$400,000.
Do any of the other council members have any questions at this time?
What are you gonna do with this? Senior housing?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's 53 units of senior housing.
How many units?
53.
53?
Mhm.
And are you a private corporation?
We're 501c3, nonprofit.
It's nonprofit.
We're a nonprofit corporation. Yeah, we've been working in Cecil County since about 1996, and this will be our second project in the county. Actually, our third project in the county of this type.
Did you do the project that's on, I think it's High Street right now?
No, that was done by a different developer. That was using 9% tax credits as well. It's a different developer, a different funding source that they use.
When do you anticipate the results of the appraisal being known?
They should be available at the end of this week. We've had to push the appraiser who's overdue, and they were supposed to be to us yesterday, and we've been promised that we do to us by the end of the week.
So the final consideration will be known soon after.
Should be, yes.
It should, and the goal is to have that number before the public hearing so that the public can comment, and obviously before this comes before this council for final vote, so that we know whether we're beneath the 415 or if we're somewhere in the sweet spot between 450 and 415, and the council can have an opportunity and the public to ask further questions and voice their position on the transaction. I think it may be useful also to kind of, this is the next step here at the county level. Of course, this being within the municipal boundaries of the town, there are some hurdles that Home Partnership has to go through at the town of Elkin municipal level. And I think it may be useful, Frank, if you just kind of give the council a brief on what processes you're going through presently and will be going through in the near future in order to further the project.
Well, very briefly, because I'm sure we could deaden one's sense of time if we went through it all, but we will be going before the Planning Commission. Well, first of all, we've introduced a text amendment, which would allow for, the original legislation had that you had to have a minimum of 150 feet of road frontage. When the original amendment's text was developed, they really did not contemplate some of these infill sites within the county, or they hadn't had any experience in doing it. I don't believe there was very many opportunities for them to do elderly housing in the historic district itself. So the first thing is a textual amendment which goes before the Planning Commission, which is presented to the mayor and town commissioners for approval. There's also a special exception for they approve by special exception senior housing in the town's central district, in the C1 zoning district that they have. So there's a special exception for the senior housing component that has to be approved first by the Planning Commission and then by the mayor and the town commissioners. There's also the Historic Architectural Review Committee, which reviews the project and will review and approve building permits. So as we go forward with that, there'll be building permits which will be reviewed by the Historic Architectural Review Committee as we proceed. So there's the Planning Commission hearings for the special exception as well as for the use as well as for the elderly component of it. And there's the textual amendment, which is being heard by the mayor and the town commissioners. And I think that's about it. I think that's about the only ones I can outline right now. That's in addition to the state funding cycles that we have to meet. And this project is located in the what's known as a qualified census tract in the town itself, which is changed actually. When the 2010 census came out, Elkton lost what was called its qualified census tract. They're no longer a QCT. So there is an interim rule, though, that the IRS has published, which allows us to consider Elkton as a qualified census tract until the end of this calendar year, which is thus the importance of why we're trying to get this done within the time frame that we are. Our financing structure requires us to use that qualified census tract or basis boost. It also requires us to use community development block grant funds, which the town has supported our application and which the state has already awarded to the project. So there will be public hearings for those, the involvement of those funding streams as well as for the town and permit approvals that we just outlined herein.
Are there any other questions from council members?
Yeah, a few. Wouldn't you want to make sure
Can you
that-
speak into the mic, please?
Wouldn't you want to make sure that you were getting approval before moving forward, that you would get the approval from the town and the planning commission?
In an ideal world, you would, but unfortunately, with the deadline of December coming before us, we've actually taken the risk and have been working with the town as well as the county with the good faith that we think that we've got a project, or at least the ability to meet the concerns of the community as well as the elected members of the county, of the town, and of the state.
Have you been getting positive feedback from the community, or
Yes.
coming up with planning commission meetings to
Yeah.
support?
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we have.
And the low-cost housing, the next-door neighbors, the senior housing community, is that offering the low tax, the low rent as well, credits?
Their rents are structured lower than ours will be, and that is because they got these 9% tax credits that I referred to. And the 9% tax credits allow you to bring in a lot more equity. to the project, which is what I sell to the lender. You sell them to Boston Capital and PNC banks of the world. So when, those are the credits that allow the companies, basically, if they purchase them from us. And that's what brings equity into the project, and they're more valuable than the funding streams that are available to us on this project.
Because they're more likely to be used and they're subsidized.
No, ma'am, because the tax credits are 9% tax credits as opposed to the 4% credits that I have to sell.
Okay.
So they're more valuable to the purchaser, the investors.
Any other questions? Is there a need for a site visit or a workshop on this matter?
I would like to see it.
I've seen it. There was a mold problem though, wasn't there, in that building, in the basement, at one time, several years ago?
At this point, we don't know that. We are getting the phase 1 done. In fact, we're getting the phase 1, and we're also doing, because this has got HUD insurance, we have to come much higher level. And we're getting a full-blown HUD assessment done as we speak. So,
You haven't had those assessments done yet?
no, ma'am, they're being done as we speak, and they'll be coming in at the end of this week. There's lots of issues with this, and that's why taking these risks and working the process through at the same time is so important, because there was a fuel tank, for example, that was buried there by the old purchasing office. But we learned that that fuel tank was removed and it was remediated. So you step into these things, you do take risks, but then you do your studies and your due diligence in the time frame that you have. That's laid out by that December closing date for us, so everything's kind of working from that.
So one last question, do you know if the apartments have all been rented out at the other facility?
There's currently about a 6-month waiting list, which is some of the reason that there's a high demand for elderly housing within the income groups that we're targeting for this. And they rented up, that project rented up within the first, I think it was 3-4 months. They rented up very quickly, and there's now a waiting list. There's also a waiting list at the villas at Whitehall, which is another senior project that's outside of the town. Well, it's actually, I think it's in the town, or is it? No, it's not in the town of Elton per se, but it's up off Whitehall Road. Yeah. That project was built in 2004, the villas at Whitehall. The senior project, the 9% tax credit project, was built in about 2011.
Mr. Wine, would you offer a tour to any council member that would like to do a tour of that property that hasn't already done so?
Sure.
I think I know the ground pretty well, but essentially you're just gonna raise that area and then basically build around it, correct?
No.
Yes, jail.
The jail will stay.
He's okay.
A lot of people want that jail to stay as intact as possible.
Part of the problem is
Historic
the historic district prevents them from raising. The other buildings are not historic, and most of them will be torn down.
Okay, so other than this, everything else goes.
Yes.
Councilman McCarthy, I'm sorry. We asked Home Partnerships to provide, they did provide a concept plan of what the renovations to 137 West or East High Street will look like. We met with the Department of Social Services last week, and they offered some comments and requests for changes to the concept plan, which we sent back to Home Partnerships. Before your site visit, we used best efforts to provide you and the rest of the council with the updated concept plan for the 137 East High Street building, so that when you walk in, you can kind of get an idea of what it will look like once the renovations are finished.
Okay, this is the first I've ever heard of this.
I'd like to have a workshop and review the concept plan and have the workshop scheduled after the appraisal is coming, so we have a more definitive idea where we end up.
Can we have Director Mahoney attend as well?
Sure. So would you schedule a workshop and we can discuss any concept plans, answer any questions, see the appraisal, and have staff, including Dave Mahoney, there to answer any questions. All right, it will be introduced tonight, and there will be a public hearing scheduled for June 18th. Okay, resolution number 47-2013 is the policy and procedures for the Cecil County Council. We've discussed this policy and procedures manual multiple times. Mr. Massey, is there anything, any new amendments to that manual since the last time we talked about it?
No, sir, except that you had asked that council review, and there are some pretty much ephemeral changes that he looked at, so we'd like to incorporate some of the changes that he had suggested.
Who's he?
Mr. Allison has reviewed it.
Have we seen that?
No, we just got them.
Do we need a workshop to go over it?
If the council.
I don't know what they are, so.
Yeah, I'm not sure how extensive.
They're primarily grammatical, I felt.
Editing type?
Yeah.
Is there any substance?
I don't believe I made any substantive changes. You probably should look at it. I don't recall any. I actually would like to commend the council because, by and large, your document, flowed with the charter, where it needed to, so.
In your opinion, do we need to delay the introduction of
No.
this?
No.
Nothing was significant enough to delay the introduction. Okay, but I do have a concern based on what I see here. I thought we agreed that we would have we agreed that we would have a public hearing on this.
Yes, sir, we had the incorrect title on it, and we had given it in your book that I believe you should have gotten an updated title.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll provide that
Oh,
for tonight.
yeah.
So it will be introduced tonight, and we will be scheduled for a public hearing. Oh, maybe they updated.
June 18th, it's right here.
Okay, then I probably my legislative book is updated, but not my legislative book.
Yeah.
Okay, so it will be scheduled, you know, the date of the public hearing. Does anybody have that in their book?
June 18th.
Mr. Robinson, you have a comment, question?
Yeah, since I know we get beat up on this a lot, I'd like to clarify the issue on fiscal note within the procedures and suggest that at the end of every resolution and bill, after the attestation and the whole thing, there be a 1 to 3 sentence fiscal note. And the director of finance.
As part of the resolution?
At the very end of everything, it just is a recap of this is what the impact is. It doesn't change what the intent, it doesn't change the whereases, it is just a comment by finance of what the impact is.
I would hope it's longer than 1 to 3 sentences.
We have looked at the bureaucracy of the state, which goes for hundreds of pages, and we think that most people understand 1 to 3 sentences. And if something more needs to be done in a work session, we would introduce it.
I'm going to suggest that we go ahead and introduce what we have, and we can amend it to include fiscal notes and anything else the public may deem necessary. It is a draft, and we would love to have comments from all the citizens and others to make it better. Is there any other thoughts or comments on the policies and procedures for the county council?
Basically, what Winston was saying is that he would propose that we have just a section after the resolution, a place for fiscal to be included. And I would agree with that. Could we?
Is there a section of our policies and procedures manual that
It would probably fall under the preparation of legislation, and then we would cite it as in our samples for resolutions and bills. We would actually say fiscal note.
There, section 5-9, page 18 is in here,
Fiscal note.
fiscal note.
This is for bills here.
And so I would propose that they be included on, that there be a section, it doesn't have to be filled out, but a section included on resolution and bills at the end of the document for fiscal note.
we can add one sentence that says that fiscal note will be either attached to or part of the resolution
One of the things, if I may say from a prior lawyer, that was helpful to council was that after the long consideration of the whole thing, that it came down to 1 to 3 sentences after the resolution, after the attestation, just to inform council and the public, this is the net impact.
But we don't have to limit it to 1 to 3 sentences.
The explanations can be ad nauseam, but
Yes.
it did seem to be helpful that regardless of all the additional information, the core concept could be expressed in 1 to 3 sentences.
But it would be, with all due respect, it'd be helpful to you, but if the council would request that there be a little bit more information, it's nice to have that option.
Oh, we will always prepare as much supportive material as is asked for.
The line on the first page will say this is what it's gonna cost you.
Well, actually, it's intended to be at the very end of everything, basically saying, here's what you've done, here's when it starts.
I would ask that, Council Manager Massey begin making a list of potential amendments to the draft document that we would consider after, the public hearing has been, finished. We would consider all of these amendments together at that time. Is that satisfactory?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'm sure that the public and others will make suggestions once we release and publish the document.
First,
Also, tonight, we will be this is not on your agenda, but we will be just considering the budget amendments, both the operating budget, the tax rate, the wastewater and landfill rates. Do we want to have any further discussion on any of those bills or resolutions at this time?
I've spoken, many times that, very concerned, it's not just a 4 million taking out of fund balance, it's also an increase of all the, sewer fees for ratepayers, for the hookups. Even though the proposal was to offset the, cost for the hookups, it still is, cost is what it is, and if we're gonna finance it, it's gonna be a 6%, interest rate with, tacked onto that. And the Seneca Point is the biggest concern of all, and it seems that people may not be aware of this because it's possibly going on a, long-term bond to finance this, or that's how we're gonna, fund it, but, the impact is 30 million more than what it would have cost for denitrification. And I have to say, I've spoken with a few members of the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee, and they're very frustrated, disheartened by all the work they've put into this. And not one of the considerations, was, approved unanimously or majority of the board. And they also wanted to express that there was quite a few, pieces of information that they had requested from the, executive side that they did not receive to make an informed decision. So it's a sad tale where we have,
Okay. Do you have any amendments that you'd like to offer? I'd like you, your comments will be good when you make a decision. But we're looking for amendments to the budget. If you have any amendments to offer to the budget, we're open right now to hear that.
yeah, my proposal was no increases to the sewer rates, no increases to solid waste,
Is there any new amendments to the budget that we have not already considered?
Okay, no, just what I proposed before.
Okay.
We live within our means, Tea Party, fiscally responsible, and I've gotten lots of emails of people disappointed that we went back on, what our position was, and I let them know I didn't. Or Michael Dunn.
I'd like to propose amendment. There was an amendment that was offered to eliminate the sick day buyback program that failed. I'd like to make an amendment that we reduce the sick day buyback program by 50%. That way, those that need the buyback can take advantage of 50% of it in fiscal year 14, and hopefully the balance of it will be funded in the following fiscal year. And I'll propose that as an amendment. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Is there any further discussion on the motion?
How much does that save us in this budget?
I think it was 280,000 plus change. It would save 145,000 more or less.
Well, during the discussions, I'm of the opinion that if you, create an expense, you pay for it. We haven't paid for it for 3 years. But if we're going to nickel and dime the budget, which we may need to do, I will consider it, at 50%. But we can't keep putting things off. We talk about not raising the landfill, and this is off the subject, I will.
No, it's part of the subject.
Well,
Okay, let's focus on the
subject.
sick day buyback program.
Okay. I really feel that this council should be prepared to pay for what they vote for.
Okay. Does anyone else have any discussion on the sick day buyback program? All those in favor of reducing it by 50%, signal by saying aye.
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 All those opposed say no. Okay, the motion passes 3-2 with Mr. Massey prepared an amendment to the budget for consideration tonight. Again, all these possible amendments will be reconsidered and finally voted on tonight.
We have a clarification of what we just did.
Yes, we'll have it in writing.
No, but am I to assume that we will pay the remaining 50% next year?
That's not guaranteed.
No, I would prefer it to be guaranteed, so that way this issue would be resolved.
I don't think we can guarantee future expenditures into the future.
And it won't be
Correct me if I'm wrong.
because it will be another.
I understand, but we'll take the amount that we've not paid plus whatever's accrued, and at that point resolve the issue. This could go on indefinitely.
Or we can revise the policy.
Well, why don't we just make this a policy right now and
We
revise it?
can't,
I don't think that was prepared. We don't have the information we need to revise the policy, but I do believe we'll have an opportunity to do that when we consider the employee procedure. Okay, is there any other amendments that Mr.
Yeah, is it appropriate to, talk about unless it was done, about adding a paragraph 4 to the, water rate.
Yes, the county executive and her staff has proposed an amendment to the budget regarding the wastewater rates pertaining to the financing of the major facility fees. And they call them connection fees, I guess, in that proposal. Was that handed out to everyone?
I believe it's in the list of amendments.
In the
List
legislative
of amendments, where do we?
It's right there, the extra packet.
Each one of you got an extra packet that was on the table. It should.
It It's underneath of it?
Yes.
Underneath of the home partnership.
They're all stapled separate. There's three separate packages. Home partnership, amendments, and the workshop agreements. I put yours right back on top.
This is Bill 2013-03.
Amendment number 3. Yes,
All the amendments are together depending on
Yes.
whether bill or resolution it's amended.
It's the second in the back.
I believe it's amendment number 4 to resolution 17.
Amendment number 4.
It's the last page.
The last page.
So just to be clear, this is still doubling the hookup fees, but the, purchaser of the facility fee would have the option of financing it, in which you could pay a third, and then finance the rest and pay 10% every year with a 6% interest, and it would come off of his property taxes, incorporated into the property taxes.
It would be on the property tax bill.
Is there anywhere else that they've done this, finance major
Yeah,
facilities?
we do assessment fees, we have beneficial assessments, and there are a number of things in this day. What we've tried to do here is address some of the concerns that were raised. One was the fact that even sometimes for individuals with the current, connection fees or major facility fees, they have a hard time with the front part. So what we've done here is basically introduce language that does not address at all what the fee is, period. It addresses purely how people can pay for it. The intention is that if a person is, the individuals that were mentioned were the residential. If individuals are near a sewer line and want to hook up, if you have a small business and you're gonna be resident within the county, how do we help them finance a connection fee? The additional part is that developer and individuals who may buy and then resell it after 2 or 3 years. What this essentially does is say that for everyone, regardless of who they are, if there is a major facilities fee or connection fee that's been established by Public Works, then that fee can be paid 1/3 at the time of issuance, and the remainder of it will be paid each July 1 until it's extinguished. What we've also done is say that if the property is sold, the original owner pays it off, and the new owner, when they buy the property, buys everything that's part of it. So the liability for the connection fee is already part of the sale price, so they're not gonna be paying extra. Also, what we've tried to do is say that if there is a transfer of a property because of divorce or inheritance, that essentially the ability to bill it over time does not change at all. So if there's a divorce, the person pays the same amount as they were originally. What we expect is if it's a residential person or a small business person, is in many instances, the connection fee becomes part of the escrow. And versus paying it annually, it actually will become part of their monthly escrow. And the mortgage company will pay it on July 1 when the property tax bill is paid. And that's the reason to include it in the property tax bill.
I think there's a clarification. This amendment, number 4, regarding major facility fees, and I'd like to say basically financing,
Yes.
applies to any major facility fee in wastewater, regardless of the amount.
Yes.
It does not specify the proposed 16,100.
Right.
This amendment could be passed independent of the amount of the proposed major facility fee.
The reason why it's incorporated in there is so that it can be passed with this because it has no financial impact to meet the requirements of the charter. The other reason to do it as part of this is it means that we can start it on July 1. Even if a commitment for a connection fee is outstanding, but the fee has not had to be paid, those connection fees would fall under this ability also.
Has this been done anywhere else?
Yes.
Where?
There were two counties.
does it with that.
Yeah, it's not an infrequent thing.
Okay, and you're saying there's no fiscal impact, have you checked with them to see what, things they might run into?
What this does is it essentially allows, by paying a third down, it mitigates the cash flow impact. A lot of connection fees are actually by the developers if they're residential, and for larger office buildings and such, it's new construction. All of those are often sold residences, or office buildings are sold to a REIT or a pension fund, and at that point of sale, it would come due as well.
Okay, I knew that you were working on a plan before, and you kind of rushed it to get it in. I guess in my mind, you throw this out to make the proposed major facility more palatable to the council and to the citizens.
And actually, I think it also addresses the concern, if you have a new business owner who's making an investment, one of the things is, what cash do I have to lay out on day one? And what this does, even with the current connection fees, is address the fact that you're required to expend less cash on day one. The liability is on your books, but you don't have to expend as much cash. So that's the reason why we said it should be to any connection fee and essentially starting on July 1.
But you're offering this amendment regardless of the
Yes, sir.
approval of the proposed.
Yes, sir. It was driven by that, I agree, because the amount of funds we were speaking of in the last budget hearing is not something the fund can absorb. This is intended to address the issues of who is under financial duress under new connection fees.
So this is a policy change that needs to be included in the budget amendment.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So,
At some point, I thought that Director Flanagan thought he was the one that would be better to address making cuts in his budget, I guess maybe for capital budget, to help finance this. I thought that was the direction that we were gonna go in.
It's operating dollars. We're speaking of 500,000 of 2.5 to 3 million dollars. Once we deduct utilities, required permits and maintenance, we're literally down to, and we didn't have long discussions because when you take a look at the costs, it narrows itself down very fast. We're either going to end up in the business where we're going to have to pay a cost to the state to discharge untreated, or we're going to fire enough individuals that the plant becomes unsafe.
Or you could have said that it went with denitrification.
No, actually, this is current cost. What we're speaking of here is, remember, part of the connection fees pays for current costs.
Mr. Flanagan already alluded to that the increase in major facility costs were related to the financing of Central Park.
there's been an offer by the county executive and her staff to amendment number 4, major facility fee financing. Is there consensus of the council to have this amendment to the budget and vote on it tonight?
I would like to make an amendment to the amendment. I would suggest that basically instead of 6% per annum, basically make it prime plus 2%, adjustable annually. That way, these low inflationary periods or low interest rate periods, these people are basically not being really kind of held to task. 6% is a very high rate in today's market, and should interest rates change, your income will be reflective of those changes, but right now we'd be basically giving these people more of the deal. Our goal is to attract people that do.
I agree. It may be easier to adopt the interest language of the IRS just because it's already out there and they publish it. We can do it ourselves, but it basically would be essentially imposed 90 days after a change because it would take that long for us to know with certainty what the rates were.
Okay, I mean, is this an acceptable thing, to the
Yes.
executive?
Yes.
Does the council understand what I'm proposing?
We will work to get some language to Mr. Massey.
You need to make, you need a motion, someone needs a second.
I'll second.
Right, well, right, there's a motion to make an amendment to change the interest rate from 6% to prime plus 2.
And make that adjustable on an annual or a timely fashion.
And is there a second to the amendment?
I did.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second to amend the financing from 6% to prime plus 2. And it'll float with the prime. Is there any further discussion on the amendment?
Yes,
The
well.
amendment to the amendment?
Okay, well, I support having options to help finance, the major facilities fee. And I think it might also be an opportunity for a business, is this correct, Winston? To, deduct annually this expense, rather than having the bulk of it, if you had to pay it all up front, it would.
There is a tax versus, a tax deduction versus accrual basis financials versus cash. What we're speaking of here is the cash versus, they may or may not be able to afford themselves with the other one.
Okay,
From
so
a
it's another
business
option.
perspective, this would improve cash flow.
Okay, so while I appreciate and support businesses having options, the overall impact, is what I can't support of the doubling.
That has nothing to do with this amendment.
It does. This is why I'm voting against it. While I support options, because of the bigger picture of the overall impact of the doubling, I will be voting against it, but I do appreciate having options for our.
Just for the record, this amendment and the amendment to the amendment applies to the current rates also. Even if we did not raise the rates, this financing option would be made available to those that want to expand their business or grow a business in Cecil County, even at the current rates.
Okay, so
And-
are we voting on this first or? the other?
We're gonna vote on the amendment to the amendment on how to calculate the interest.
Okay, just for
That's-
clarity, I'm voting only for the additional options on home buyers or
No,
businesses.
no,
the
we're voting on the
finance.
interest rate clarification, okay. There's been a motion to amend the amendment to change the interest rate from 6% to prime plus 2. All those in favor of amending the amendment on the interest rate, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay. Oh, there was one opposed, 4-1, the motion passes. Okay, now we're gonna vote on the amendment number 4, which is a major facility fee financing option. And there's been a motion and a second to approve the amendment. All those in favor of approving the amendment, please signal by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say no.
No,
Okay, that motion also passes 3-2. And, you'll have to amend the amendment and pass, provide it as a resolution tonight. Okay. I know this is difficult, but I'm going to make a motion to amend the proposed major facility fee from the current rates to $12,000 across the board for all categories. The proposed, okay, end the motion. Is there a second for discussion?
second it for discussion.
Okay. I have serious concern about the $16,100 that has been proposed to provide major facility fee for all categories. And if you look at the schedule that was provided to us by staff, the 16,000 still is, in my opinion, much higher than most of our surrounding jurisdictions. And I do agree with Diana and others that we want to grow our growth area, but we need to be competitive. It just feels that we'll be out of the price range at 16.1. There may be others charging more. There may be other communities that have higher major facility fees. But I just have this fear that we're going to be uncompetitive. And I know there's a dilemma here on matching the costs versus the cost of operations versus the major facility fees, but somehow we have to make it happen. I just cannot support, I don't like raising the rates at all. There are people out there that will be mad at the council for considering any rate increases as additional taxes, but that's not reasonable. So I would support a major facility fee of $12,000.
Can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
Mr. Flanagan, do you have this piece of paper in front of you?
I don't recognize it from this distance.
Mr. Robinson, could you prepare this document or give it to Mr. Flanagan?
I didn't.
Okay?
And the question I have, and if you think that you can address it, please, if you can't, then I understand. Why is it that the other jurisdictions that we look at right now have such much cheaper rates? Could it possibly be because the county has not invested the necessary money over a long period of time to provide these things sensibly?
There are a multitude of possible reasons or explanations. I would say that's one of them. In other words, they've, for whatever reason, have underinvested in the utility and have kept the rates and fees artificially low.
So this might be a catch-up fee.
And I would say that, that has historically been the case in Cecil County, where the Board of County Commissioners has just historically had extreme difficulty at setting rates and fees at a level to adequately resource the utility, which resulted in underinvestment. And so I would argue, to a large degree, it is a catch-up fee. Another possible explanation for other jurisdictions is perhaps they do not operate their utility as an enterprise fund. Perhaps they subsidize that operation with general fund money, either in the interest of keeping the connection fee low in an effort to encourage economic development or other possible reasons. So there isn't one answer, and it could be different answers for different places.
Can I offer two more suggestions for the answer to your question? Number one is Newark, Delaware probably made an investment in their wastewater infrastructure many, many, many years ago.
Isn't that precisely what I was saying?
And number two is some of these communities have not had to upgrade to ENR. Some of these communities are at a lower level of treatment that has lower operating costs and certainly a lower capital investment.
The thing is, at some point in time, we will have to bring these up to increasingly higher standards. And if we decide not to do it now, when do we decide to do it? If we can't pay the bills for the landfill, when can we pay the bills? These are very germane questions.
Yes, that's true, but we're talking about setting of our major facility.
Well,
rate
this
at
is the
12,000
basis of it.
Where
Where do we start?
All right, yes or no to the 12?
Okay, no, wait.
Argument for it or against it?
You're ignoring everything that I've researched. I'm telling you that, we were not competitive. $60 million was that Director Flanagan told us we were going to have to finance. He withheld the letter from NDE and the consultant showing the scope of work that was actually needing to be done in E&R, and that the cheapest way to go is denitrification, and that we could do all of this with the flush fund money. And I've asked for information. It was very hard getting the information from Director Flanagan. At some point, I'm even proposing that we would have a no confidence vote of what he's
Okay, so that's off the subject.
No, it's not.
Yes, it
It's,
is.
okay.
It has nothing to do with deciding whether or not to
I'm gonna
raise a
calm
major
down.
conflict.
Councilman McCarthy, I would encourage you to go to my site. I'll print
I
off
have
for
read
you
your
and
site
I'll put
like
it
2
right
or
in front of
3
you, and
times.
these are the facts. These are
The facts of the matter are is that your system is very limited now, it will be limited in the future, and when it does basically expire, we will have no recourse but to spend a huge amount of money to basically make it work. Those are the facts, not your facts. What you believe in the facts are not
enough.
It goes up to 5
Enough.
MGD.
I don't care. You just said the other day.
You don't care.
Alan,
That's
Diane.
exactly right.
Okay, that's enough. Last comment on the motion. I know that we have very diverse opinions, from doing absolutely nothing to the connection rates to going to the full 1610. The fact is that there will be a default of doing nothing if we don't come to an alternate conclusion, because I guess I'm the swing vote, and if you can't convince me to go to something different, I'm gonna stick to the 12 or less. So, I have to warn Alan and Ms. Bowlesby that you can stick to your 1610, and I appreciate why, and I understand why, and I encourage you to stick to it if you feel strongly to it, but the answer is that if we don't compromise in some way, we will be at our old existing current rates.
I would
which are-
consider it if you showed me where you're making up the loss. Where you're proposing to take the money out of. Because if there's gonna
There's
be a
only one
shortfall.
place it can come from, that would come from the general fund or increase the water
Yeah.
rates. Or the sewer
And
rates.
the obvious dilemma is that we shouldn't be doing this to begin with. And there's an easy answer.
You're absolutely right, this should have been done 30 years ago, but it's never progressed in a forward fashion.
It's what, hold it. The burden is gonna be on the Public Works Department to either cut operating expenses or cut projects.
You have to ask for that right now.
I
Along with your
don't, I'm not,
members.
as we discussed, the last time we met to discuss this issue, I am no expert on how to run a sewer plant or how to treat wastewater. And therefore, I can't come up with a good reason or how to do that.
At some point,
And I'm not going to.
you have to be responsible for your vote, Mr. Hodge. And when facts are in front of you, when there's a pattern of not presenting the information, then you can't keep saying he's the expert.
Okay, I think have the opinion that all this rate increase has to do with Seneca Point upgrade, and I think that's not true.
It's
It's not true. I
It's
think
not all related to it,
a lot,
but a
okay,
portion.
I think a
yes.
lot. Okay. The fact is that I also feel that I've offered for the last 3 years in a row to ask the council or the commissioners in the past to fund an efficiency study, and that's been rejected.
You just look at the facts.
So you know just off the top of your head, it's just obvious.
No, it's not off the top of my head.
I would
I did
prefer-
my research.
I would prefer to
And the
have an
Budget
ex-
Advisory Committee, agreed. And there were others as well. You got the information from Mr. Hartman, from
The-
Mr. Boyle, from Mr. Kaplan. He
You haven't
provided this.
listed one expert yet. You have not listed the Citizens Budget Advisory Committee,
Actually,
Ron
yes.
Hartman, Bill Feely, all the others that you missed are
Bill
not
Feely.
experts in the industry. Not experts
He's
in the industry.
He's the expert.
In order for this
Mr.
analysis.
Hartman, he has a history of,
He-
fine,
he's-
and he went to the experts, his contact,
Right.
and I told you about the other person I have, but I can't really give their name.
All right, there's been a motion and a second, and I'll mentioned, is for discussion purposes only, and we've had a discussion. It's now time to vote on whether or not we want to approve a major facility fee of $12,000 across all categories.
This is a.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no.
No.
That's, the motion failed.
It's
One
not gonna
four.
be enough cover for you, but good try.
Okay. Is there any other motions that any council member wants to make?
Yes,
Wait a minute, I'm wrong. I said that the default was,
16-1.
the default is 16-1, isn't it?
That's correct.
So I'm sorry, Diana and Alan, I was talking wrong, I was really talking to Diane and Mike. Diane and Mike, you just raised the fee to 16-1.
Yep, like I said, you think that's gonna be enough cover for you.
No,
You already raised the bill.
Wait a minute, this has nothing to do with
Point of
cover.
order.
I am trying to reach a reasonable
Trying to
conclusion
control the
here.
conversation.
And your steadfastness on
I
an
think you're
issue.
handing off to the Guardian what the next headline will be.
Point of order.
I am trying to do what I think is
Huge
best.
point of
Hold on,
order.
Diane, stop.
It's hard for me to take this serious. This is such a puppet show.
I disagree with you because I'm really on your side of this issue.
Oh, baloney, please.
Okay.
You couldn't even say that.
I have said, and I agree with you that the 16-1 is too high. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, this is.
But
this is
you
all
have concluded,
I know it costs
you have
money.
concluded that you
You
will
have
only accept no change.
That the, MDR.
Why don't y'all just have a private conversation
All
outside
right.
the chamber?
Is there any other motions regarding, the major facility fee increase? Or proposed increase?
Well,
And I'm sorry, I made a mistake, because the
yeah,
default,
you
the default
forgot
is
to go through
16-1.
the orders, yeah, the cues and all of that.
Okay. All right, I'm gonna make everyone else mad at me, because I'm gonna make two other proposals on regarding the budget, but not on wastewater. This has to do with the operating budget. I'm gonna throw out a reduction to public safety of $250,000. In public safety, the sheriff's.
We have emergency services.
No, the sheriff. The sheriff,
Law enforcement.
law enforcement.
So is that one police officer?
That, I would hope, and this is, well, is there a second to my motion?
I'll second it for discussion.
Okay, for discussion purposes, let me explain. I hope that the sheriff could fund all 5 proposed positions. I would hope that he would find $250,000 in his budget that are less important than the 5 deputies. I would hope that he could find something in his budget that he could give up and still hire 5 deputies. I also, and Craig, let me ask you a question. Was there a factor in there, the fact that he won't be able to get all these deputies up and running by July 1st? Was that factored into the budget?
Yes, there was a 75% attrition rate applied to the 5 deputy positions, assuming that they would not be able to be funded until approximately 9 months into the fiscal year.
I would hope that the sheriff could find something less important than the hiring of 5 deputies that he could cut out to benefit our overall budget situation.
Mr. Hodge, would you, be willing to, give us your thought process on this? You don't have to, but I'm curious.
I believe that the economy is improving. I believe that our budget is in pretty good shape. But I believe that we could be doing a little bit better on not increasing the budget as fast as we are. And I did ask for, and I really hope that Mr. Robinson will come up with the explanation on the 7.4 million, but I would like to see us not grow the budget as dramatically as it's been proposed. You know, I think that, and I give a lot of credit to the county executive and the staff, because I think they did a good job, and I think that they're looking out for the best interest of the citizens. But if the economy does not roll along as well as expected, it could put a pinch on our budget. And I'd like to be a little bit more conservative in the budget process. And that's why I'd like to move a little bit off of the larger budgets.
So you're gonna have other proposals?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
If
Well,
I may, address what the budget is for law enforcement. Page 34 of the expenditures budget report that was introduced back on March 1. Salaries and benefits are $8.2 million. Gasoline is $350,000. Vehicle and equipment repair is about $325,000. The difference between that and the proposed budget of 9.3 is about 400,000. I don't have a calculator in my hand, so I'm just making an estimate. I don't see where 400,000 could come in without killing off some essential things, as in postage and uniforms and training for the current staff.
What do you mean the 400?
250.
I said 250.
What I'm saying is, out of the 400,000, if we were to reduce
The 400
250,000, we would be reducing uniforms, which is 108,000, training 50,000. I'm not sure where what I'm trying to tell you is, if we're keeping personnel the same because we are actually talking of the objection that the 5 new deputies aren't there, then it becomes a matter of, okay, if we put the 5 deputies in there, we're keeping the salary at the proposed budget of 8.2, and then where do we pull it from? What I'm saying is gasoline is estimated at $350. The actual for 12 was $361. The uniforms are estimated at 108, and training at 50. There isn't that much. I mean, basically in the recent 4 to 5 years, anything that is non-essential is gone. What you're left with is purely the core staff, plus vehicles to transport them, plus training to keep them up to date. That's it.
I would propose that, by
Okay.
doing what you did, I think there's an opportunity of what I was asking for from Sheriff Chaney, is to show what he's been doing, to address his website, and also come up with a plan to earn back those 2 other deputies. Because my argument has always been, you can't just keep throwing money at the problem if they don't have a plan. And I would appreciate that strategy, to where we can see he's put some effort into
Okay.
addressing.
We're talking about amendments to the budget.
Well,
We're talking about amendments to the budget.
all right, I'm just sharing with you
Okay.
my perspective and why I would support it.
Mr. Robinson, does that include, money that's dedicated to the detention center?
No, the detention center is a separate budget. They were speaking of law enforcement. That's the
Okay, I
reason
just
why
want to
they-
make sure, because it all goes through the sheriff's office, does it not?
Yes.
So what are the total numbers if you add those two together?
Because detention has to feed the prisoners, they have additional costs which the law enforcement does not. Their cost structure is different. You essentially have $4.8 million worth of payroll costs. You have things like food supplies for $360,000, along with similar supplies of $150,000. There is $1.6 million in professional services, which medical. So there are correctional facility has a different cost structure and basically has to meet the needs of those who are within the structure as well as those who are employed by it.
How would you define their needs?
At a minimum, it's the supervision to assure everybody stays contained.
Okay.
And the next part is to assure that they are fed and housed adequately according to state and human standards.
Does that pertain to what the temperature said at the detention center?
I actually have no idea what the temperature is set.
Do you have any feel for what the utility bills are in there?
Yes.
Are they expensive?
Actually, they are in the building maintenance costs.
Can the sheriff move funds from the detention facility to the sheriff's department or vice versa?
Yes, he can.